Chapter 2. War on the Red Planet. He lined his spacemen up, ready for battle. This was the biggest war the planet Mars had ever seen. He collected monster figures, too. He had some of the most popular ones from TV. Billy Bigfoot, and the creature from the bottomless sewer, and the abominable two-headed spider boy. He wasn't allowed to watch TV, but he read about all the monster movies and shows. He pretended the monsters were the Martians. His silver space cadets were the good guys. Their ray guns could blast a Martian to molecules. He made all of the sound effects with his mouth, explosions, the zip, zip, zip of ray guns, Martians screaming as they fell. It was a few days after he ripped Droopy the clown to pieces. He missed Droopy. He was an important part of his puppet collection. When he tore him up, he didn't even realize it. It was scary to be that angry and not even know what he was doing. That morning before the war on Mars, he worked on his stamp collection, and he organized his antique bottle collection on its shelf. He was doing anything he could to keep away from the chapter entitled The Physics of the Gravitational Pull. He was supposed to be reading in his science book. Last night, Mother made him read his history text till bedtime. When he looked in the mirror this morning, his eyes were tired and bloodshot. Kaboom! He dropped a pillow over the Martian monsters. They crumbled beneath it. The war was brutal. But he stopped the battle when once again he heard his parents arguing outside his door. His father sounded very angry this time. His mother was not arguing back. "Listen to him in there," Father said. "All he does is make up baby games and play with toys. He lives in a fantasy world." "I keep telling him to study harder," Mother said. "What else can I do?" "You won't let him be normal," Father boomed. "It's enough. Enough! I'm going to make a man out of him." The spaceman figure dropped from his hand. He shoved the monsters off the bed and climbed to his feet. He heard Father's heavy footsteps treading toward his room, and he heard Mother's frightened voice. "Charles, stop! What are you going to do?" The bedroom door swung open. He felt a shock of fear as Father came bursting in. Father wasn't tall, but he was built like a bear, big and athletic, broad and tough-looking. He was red-faced and stubbly. He didn't like to shave. He had straight black haircut and a short flat top. His eyes were pale blue under thick black eyebrows. He had a stare like a ray gun beam. He wore flannel shirts and baggy jeans that he seldom had cleaned. He laughed in sometimes big He-Man cruel laughter. But he seldom smiled. Father turned his blue eyes on the monsters and spaceman scattered on the bedroom floor. Then he raised his gaze. He scratched his stubbly beard and stared hard. "There are wild turkeys in the woods," he said. He didn't talk. He boomed. The boy didn't know how to reply to Father. He just stared back at him, his legs trembling. "You want to come hunting with me?" Father demanded. The boy swallowed. His mouth suddenly felt so dry. He pictured the big crossbows his father kept in the mudroom in the back of the house. The boy liked to fight pretend wars, but those crossbows frightened him a lot. Father didn't believe in using a hunting rifle. He said hunting rifles made it too easy. Hunting with a crossbow required skill. The boy shuddered every time he walked past the weapons case. The crossbows terrified him. Father narrowed his eyes at the boy. "Do you want to come hunting or not?" No. No way. He didn't want to go. But he wanted Father to like him. He had to show his father that he wasn't a cowardly baby and a freak. "Yes," he said. His voice cracked a little. Yes, okay, let's go." Chapter 3. Clouds covered the sun, and the woods grew dark. It was early spring, and the air still carried a chill. It had rained the day before, and the ground was soft and muddy. His shoes sank into the mud as he hurried to keep up with Father. Father took long strides, crunching the twigs and leaves under his boots. He had the crossbow slung over his right shoulder of his brown leather jacket. A quiver of arrows bounced on his back. The boy heard the trees shaking overhead. Birds probably, lightning in the branches. Something scampered across their path, a fat brown squirrel. The turkeys were on the other side of that clearing, his father whispered. He pointed. 2 families of them, some fat, juicy birds. They travel together in a line. His words made the boy excited. He guessed because Father was actually talking to him, explaining something to him. He He usually only grunted a few words or shouted at the boy about something he had done wrong. This was the first time ever that the two were on an adventure together, like friends almost. So the boy was excited, but also frightened. Watching that deadly crossbow made him feel shaky and afraid. And as they walked, he kept his eyes on it. He watched it bob up and down over his father's shoulder, and he thought about what a powerful weapon it was, how fast and straight it sent the arrows flying. He imagined the thwack the arrow made, driven deep into a tree trunk. He had watched Father practice target shooting for hours in the back of their house. It never failed to fill him with a cold dread. The sky brightened a little. Some light washed down through the thick trees overhead. A gust of wind made the branches tremble and creak. Father kicked a rock out of his way. It made a loud thump as it slammed into a tree trunk and bounced aside. The boy slipped over a thicket of wet leaves and fell to his knees. His father didn't notice. He just kept taking those long strides. The boy scrambled to catch up to him. Father, he started. He raised a hand to shush the boy. He led the way into a small grassy clearing. He pressed a finger against his lips, then pointed. The boy saw 4 or 5 fat wild turkeys, heads bobbing as they walked. There they are, Father whispered. Then, to the boy's surprise, Father slid the crossbow off his shoulder and shoved it hard into his hands. The boy wasn't expecting it. He nearly dropped it. He could feel his heart thudding in his chest. He felt a little dizzy. The crossbow was heavier than he imagined. But Father, he started. Father had his eyes on the bobbing, strutting turkeys. Let's see you give it a try, son, he whispered. Hurry, hold it steady like this. But Father, he moved the boy's hands over the handle. He pulled an arrow from the quiver and fit it into the crossbow. I'll steady it for you, son, he said softly. Hold it here. He moved the boy's hands down to the trigger. Aim through the sight. The boy struggled to hold it up. It was heavy and too long for him. He couldn't balance it. He didn't know how to aim it or keep it steady. I'm just a kid, Father, he stammered. I'm only 10. This thing is too big for me. He didn't mean for it to come out so whiny. Look, it's almost as big as I am. Father made a disgusted face. His blue eyes turned cold. You've got to learn sometime, he said through his clenched teeth. The boy didn't want him to be angry. He wanted desperately to make his father proud of him. Okay, he said. I'll try. Be a man, he said. A man has to know how to hunt. He raised the crossbow to his shoulder. His knees started to fold. He almost sank to the ground. He just couldn't balance it. Hold it like this, Father said. He moved the handle over the boy's shoulder. Then he slid his son's hand, to the trigger. Across the clearing, 2 more wild turkeys appeared. They began to peck at something in the grass. There were at least 7 or 8 of them now. I don't really know how to aim, the boy said. Don't worry about that, Father replied. Just get the feel of the crossbow. You don't have to shoot any turkeys today. First, you have to learn to handle the weapon. The boy nodded. His heart was still racing, but he felt a little better. At least his father didn't really expect him to shoot anything. Take a practice shot, Father said. He turned his son slightly and pointed. Just aim at those trees. Go ahead, take a shot. You'll get the feel of it. Could the boy do it? He suddenly felt terrified. His hands were so sweaty, the crossbow handle felt slippery. He was trembling so hard. He wondered if Father could see him shaking. I want him to be proud of me, the boy thought. I want him to like me. I really don't want to fail. He took a deep breath and let it out. He tightened both hands, aimed through the sight. He aimed the sleek, deadly arrow at the fat tree trunk across the grass. He took another shuddering breath, squeezed the trigger with all of his strength, fired, and as burning pain shot through his body, he opened his mouth in a deafening scream.